Ever wondered what Amish elders carefully avoid discussing with outsiders? It's not evil intent, but survival through controlled narrative. These 10 realities complicate the simple, peaceful image tourists encounter. The truths that don't fit the brochure reveal a community far more complex than most outsiders realize. The internal struggles. Behind the unified appearance Amish communities present to outsiders lies significant internal conflict between progressive and conservative factions, debating technology, adoption, education, interaction with modern society, and dozens of other issues creating tensions that occasionally split entire church districts. These disputes aren't philosophical abstractions, they tear families apart when parents choose different sides, with some following progressive bishops allowing more technology, while others join ultra-conservative groups, rejecting even the limited modern contact their former church permitted. Communities that appear monolithic to tourists actually contain diverse viewpoints ranging from near Mennonite openness to Schwarzentrubber ultra-conservatism. Youth retention represents another carefully guarded concern. While tourism materials emphasize that 85–90% of Amish youth choose baptism and remain Amish, elders rarely discuss the 10–15% who leave, a percentage representing thousands of young people annually who reject the lifestyle despite years of cultural immersion. These departures trouble elders because they suggest the system isn't working for everyone, contradicting the narrative of contentment and fulfillment. The shunning that follows departure creates additional family trauma that elders prefer outsiders not examine too closely. Parents shunning their own children, siblings refusing to speak to each other, grandparents who cannot hold grandchildren, these painful realities undermine the family values image that attracts many outsiders to admire Amish life. The tourism paradox. Amish elders carefully manage the contradiction at the heart of many modern Amish communities: economic dependence on tourism, dollars from outsiders, fascinated by lifestyles, supposedly rejecting worldly values, including the commercialization that tourism represents. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, Holmes County, Ohio, and other major settlements, tourism generates millions annually through restaurants, shops, buggy rides, and tours that package Amish life as commodity for outsider consumption. This money flows unevenly, creating a business class of Amish entrepreneurs operating tourist-oriented enterprises versus traditional farmers whose incomes haven't kept pace, generating class divisions that contradict supposed equality. The staging of authenticity for tourists bothers many traditional Amish who resent becoming attractions in their own communities. When tour buses drive slowly past homes photographing families, when tourists peer into workshops and ask intrusive questions, when every trip to town becomes a photo opportunity, the attention feels exploitative rather than flattering. Yet the economic benefits prevent organized resistance, since many families now depend on tourism income either directly or indirectly. Elders recognize that tourism money changes community values, time becomes monetized, outsider approval matters more. Maintaining picturesque appearance for tourists influences decisions, and younger generations learn that their lifestyle has commercial value that can be leveraged. These shifts undermine the separation from worldly values that supposedly defines Amish identity, creating cognitive dissonance that elders prefer not discussing with the very tourists generating the contradictions. The technology reality. The carefully maintained image of Amish as technology-rejecting simple folk hides a far more complex reality, where smartphones hide in workshop drawers, internet connections run business computers, and modern machinery fills plain factories, all justified through theological loopholes that outsiders aren't meant to scrutinize too carefully. The community phone shanty, presented to tourists as emergency-only communication, often contains smartphones used for business purposes, with young people texting and browsing when elders aren't watching. What's forbidden in the home becomes acceptable in the shanty through technicalities that maintain rural appearances while accommodating practical needs. Business operations, particularly bend technology rules. Amish furniture makers use pneumatic nail guns powered by diesel compressors, arguing the electricity restriction applies only to public grid power, not self-generated power. Computer systems running inventory and accounting software are acceptable if located in separate office buildings rather than homes. Solar panels charge batteries running modern equipment as long as the solar panels aren't mounted on home roofs. These elaborate workarounds create a loophole culture that technically obeys the letter of Ordnung restrictions while violating their spirit. Young people's technology use represents another reality elders manage carefully. Teenagers during Rumspringa often own cars and smartphones, accessing internet and social media that supposedly contradict Amish values. Elders allow this partly because Rumspringa traditionally permits exploration, but also because absolute prohibition would be unenforceable given modern technology's ubiquity. The hope is that youth will voluntarily reject technology at baptism, though increasingly that rejection is superficial, giving up ownership while maintaining access through friends or business justifications. The carefully constructed narrative that Amish reject technology holistically serves important functions, maintaining distinct identity, justifying separation from mainstream culture, and preserving elder authority. Admitting the nuanced reality would complicate the simple story that makes Amish both internally cohesive and externally fascinating. The education purpose. Amish education ending at 8th grade is publicly framed as preserving simple agrarian skills and preventing pride through excessive learning. The unspoken reality is that limited education serves as crucial control mechanism, preventing exposure to alternative worldviews that might challenge religious authority and community structure. Restricting education to elementary levels means Amish youth never encounter systematic critical thinking training, comparative religion studies, or philosophical frameworks that might lead them to question received beliefs. They learn reading, arithmetic, and practical skills sufficient for farming and trades, but not the analytical tools that would enable them to evaluate whether the Amish way is truly best or simply the only option they understand. This limitation proves strategically valuable for maintaining authority. When complex decisions arise, medical treatments, business investments, legal matters, community members must rely on bishops and elders for guidance because they lack the educational foundation to research and evaluate options independently. The dependence preserves traditional power structures that higher education would threaten. Elders defend 8th grade completion through religious arguments about humility and biblical sufficiency, but they rarely discuss the pragmatic benefits. Youth who never attend high school, never encounter peers from diverse backgrounds, never study sciences that might challenge biblical literalism, never develop independence that comes from engaging ideas beyond parental control. The few Amish children with significant learning disabilities receive exceptions, allowing special education beyond 8th grade because they pose no threat to community order. Their challenges prevent them from using education for independence or questioning authority. This exception proves that education restriction isn't absolute principle but calculated strategy for social control. The cost to individuals, limited career options, dependence on community expertise, difficulty navigating modern systems when necessary matters less to elders than the collective benefit of maintaining community cohesion through managed ignorance. The medical complexity. The Amish relationship with modern medicine is far more complex than the simple narrative of plain people distrusting worldly science. In reality, Amish regularly use hospitals, doctors, and modern treatments while selectively avoiding certain medical practices for reasons having more to do with authority and cost than theological principle. Most Amish communities accept vaccination despite early resistance, recognizing that preventing disease protects community health. They visit doctors for injuries, illnesses, and childbirth complications when home remedies prove insufficient. They undergo surgeries, take prescription medications, and use medical technology ranging from X-rays to MRIs. This acceptance contradicts the simplicity narrative, but reflects pragmatic recognition that pre-modern medicine cannot address serious conditions. What Amish more consistently avoid is health insurance, regular preventive care, and mental health treatment. Insurance avoidance stems partly from religious objections to participation in worldly systems and partly from cost community medical funds covering catastrophic expenses feel more acceptable than monthly premiums flowing to corporations. Preventive care avoidance reflects both cost consciousness and fatalism about health being in God's hands rather than human control. Mental health represents the most troubling medical gap. Depression, anxiety, trauma, and other psychological conditions carry heavy stigma in communities prizing emotional stoicism and collective over individual needs. Amish suffering mental health crises often receive only prayer and bishop counseling rather than professional psychiatric care, leading to untreated conditions that sometimes end tragically. The genetic disorders resulting from limited gene pools, dwarfism, metabolic conditions, developmental disabilities occur at higher rates in Amish populations, but are rarely discussed with outsiders since they suggest problems with the closed community model and consanguinity that marrying within small populations creates. The class structure. The Amish emphasis on humility and equality obscures significant wealth inequality within communities where successful business owners live far more comfortably than struggling farmers, creating class divisions that contradict the egalitarian image presented to outsiders. Tourism and manufacturing businesses generate wealth that farming cannot match in modern economics. An Amish furniture manufacturer employing dozens of workers and selling nationwide may have annual revenues exceeding $1 million, while a farmer working 80 acres barely supports his family. This income disparity creates lifestyle differences that humility norms attempt to minimize but cannot eliminate entirely. Wealthy Amish build larger homes, take more trips to visit distant relatives, purchase higher quality buggies and horses, and eat better food than poor Amish, differences expressed subtly rather than ostentatiously but real nonetheless. The tourism business owners in Lancaster County occupy a different economic universe than subsistence farmers in rural settlements, though both are Amish. This wealth concentration creates influence disparities. Rich Amish fund community projects, provide employment, and earn respect that translates into authority beyond their official church positions. Their opinions carry weight because of their demonstrated success and the dependence of poorer community members on their goodwill. Poor Amish exist but remain largely invisible to tourists who see picturesque farms and bustling shops, but not families struggling with medical debt, crop failures, or insufficient land to support growing families. The charitable assistance these families receive helps survival but creates dependencies that further stratify the supposedly equal community. The hidden abuse. Perhaps the most carefully guarded reality involves domestic abuse occurring within Amish homes, where patriarchal family structures, community privacy norms, and limited outside intervention create conditions where abuse continues with minimal accountability. Spousal abuse in Amish communities faces similar barriers to intervention as in mainstream society: victim fear, economic dependence, children considerations, but with additional factors unique to Amish context. Victims cannot call police without bringing shame on families and possibly facing shunning for involving outsiders in private matters. Women cannot easily leave since they typically lack education, work experience, or resources to support themselves and children outside the community. Church discipline for abusers often proves inadequate. Bishops counsel offenders to change behavior and may impose temporary restrictions, but they lack enforcement mechanisms beyond shunning, a punishment so severe that it's rarely imposed for domestic abuse, which many view as private family matter rather than community-level offense requiring such drastic response. Child abuse similarly suffers from inadequate intervention. Physical discipline is culturally accepted to degrees that mainstream society would consider excessive, creating ambiguity about where legitimate punishment ends and abuse begins. Sexual abuse, when it occurs, faces massive reporting barriers, since victims may not be believed, may face pressure to forgive for family harmony, and may have no access to outside authorities or therapeutic support. The closed nature of Amish communities that tourists find charming becomes dangerous for abuse victims who cannot escape or seek help without losing everything familiar and facing complete social isolation. The youth experience. Rumspringa, the period when Amish teenagers experience freedom before deciding whether to join the church, is presented to outsiders as innocent experimentation with minor worldly activities. The reality often involves serious risk-taking that elders know about but tolerate as necessary release valve for youth raised under strict rules. Substance abuse during Rumspringa reaches levels that would alarm most parents.